Welcome to Wellthy Living Conversations. I'm Lisa, your host and founder of Wellthy Living. It's here that I connect with a variety of wonderful humans to have inspiring and insightful conversations to help you live a meaningful, connected and well life, both personally and professionally. So if I've learned anything in my life, it's that life is unpredictable. And despite having and wishing that I could somehow control every step of my path and ensure predictability, I can't. So my planning process is ongoing and agile. And my strategy is to find joy, opportunity, comfort, and even excitement in the uncertainty of life. So in today's episode, we're going to chat about the value and about the pitfalls of planning and having structure and systems, and how to incorporate intuitive flow and flexibility. So my guest today is Claire Riley. She's a list-ticking, action planning, action-taking, colour-coding, butt-kicking, organising goddess and productivity guru who helps entrepreneurs simplify their processes, make a plan and take real action. She's also a recovering perfectionist, a mum of two, a wine enthusiast and an obsessive traveller. Welcome, Claire.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks so much for having me.
Our pleasure. Welcome. So as a marketing and strategy business coach, Claire works with women who are amazing at what they do, but feel clueless about how to run a profitable, sustainable business the easy way. So Claire, it is so wonderful to have you here today to talk about this topic, because I think that it's really timely going through a pandemic when we have so much of our plans have gone out the window, and it makes me question planning and the benefits of planning and the value of planning and whether it's even worthwhile. And you are such a queen of to-do lists and planning and all things around systems. So I thought that you could help today with me and the listeners sort of nut out this topic of planning and why it is actually so beneficial, and maybe where it's not, and maybe we need to put a little bit more of our intuitive flow or life's unpredictable circumstances into kind of our plans.
Yeah, absolutely. Can't wait to have a chat about this. This is going to be amazing.
Yeah, so maybe we can start, if you can sort of talk about the difference between systems and formulas or blueprints.
All right. So I guess I want to put a bit of an asterisk on all of this, and it probably ties in really beautifully, with this entire conversation about how much to plan and how much structure and how much formula and how many systems to have in place and that sort of thing. And I guess it comes down to it's a continuum. It's not I'm organized or I'm disorganized. There's no such thing. And there's, different parts of your personal and business or professional life that you sit at different parts of that spectrum, and that changes as well. And one of the big questions I always ask people is about their planning and why don't you plan, or why don't you such and such as much as you think as much as you'd like to. And a lot of people say, oh, well, I don't like to, I just want to go with my intuition and go with the flow. And my response to that is, if it's working for you, go nuts. If you're someone who needs lots of structure to feel safe and to feel like you can play and you've got that freedom, then that's what you need. But if you are someone who just feels hemmed in by structure and strategy and all that sort of thing, then don't do that if it's working for you. But a lot of people sort of like, oh no, it feels too claustrophobic. It might just be that they haven't actually found the right type of strategy or the right balance and that sort of thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just sort of, start with that sort of thing, that I'm a professional Virgo and I love my to-do list, and I make my to-do list of all the to-do lists I'm going to write. And I do like having quite a bit of structure, because it that's what makes me feel that sense of freedom when I've got stuff to fall back on, right?
Yeah.
And in terms of the difference between having a strategy, having systems versus a formula, I guess systems are the things that that are repetitive. So anything that you kind of do more than once that is either a learned thing or something that you still need to follow a checklist to go through. That's the sort of thing that helps you to be more efficient or effective or get the outcome that you're trying to get, or make sure that, I don't know, things get done on time or to whatever standard you want them to get done, and that sort of thing. Whereas a formula, I've never been asked this question, so I'm still kind of like sussing it out a little bit, but I guess a formula is taking into account where you sit on that spectrum and what mechanisms and structures you need to feel you're most abundant or you're most safe or you're most playful or whatever it is that's a high value for you, mixed in with the other shit that happens in your life. So what about your family? What do they need? The people who you live with, the people who you interact with, the people who you work for or work with, how you like to live in a physical space and what that requires that you have in your home or your physical environment, what your goals are, what your financial situation is. I guess it's like the formula to me in my head is probably pulling all of the external and internal needs and factors into what sort of structures are going to work best for you at any given time.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I suppose, look, it's an interesting one, isn't it? And the reason that I asked it, and I'm glad you've never been asked that before, because I like questions that are, that it might be different or new or you've thought about. But I suppose what was coming from my head when I was thinking about the difference between systems and blueprints or formulas is that in my head, I had this idea that, because you see it all the time, on social media about, this blueprint will save you and the formula will save you. And when I see that, I cringe a little bit personally. And I think the reason that I do is because I feel like it's generic, as opposed to everything that you described then about what's so important about systems, and even just acknowledging your Virgo personality is about personalization. Yeah. So for me, what I love, I think about and think's really important about the idea of systems is personalizing the system, which is what you described so beautifully. And to me, when I think of a blueprint or a formula, I think it's more generic and something that is just like, spit this out and it's going to give you success. Whereas I don't like that idea, because it's like, well, I'm not you and you're not me, and you don't have the same financial finances as I currently might have, or you might not have children and I do, or my life might look different, or you might be in Brisbane right now while I'm in Melbourne in lockdown. So I couldn't agree more. And I feel the same when people do the secret 8 steps or the 108 part formula or that sort of thing. I think the same. I'm like, that's awesome. And I'm really glad that someone's found something that's so prescriptive and that has worked for them. But I think it, unfortunately, the people who, and a lot of us do it in startup business, or when we're sort of venturing into a new space where we're not very confident, we feel like we've kind of got to latch onto something, and often that is someone else's structure or strategy. And so then you try it and it doesn't work for you 100% because we have the kids and they didn't have kids, or we are in Brisbane, not in Melbourne, or we have any multitude of other personal stuff going on that prohibits us from being able to stick to that to a T. And that could even just be, I don't want to say those words. I don't want to use that script. I don't want to ask those people for that, or, whatever. It's not even about the ability to implement. It's about the mindset and the values of every different person. So I totally agree. I really don't like that. However, I do like having that sort of structure if you have the ability to take it with a grain of salt and to be okay with tailoring it to yourself and taking the bits that will work and trying it out, and not taking the bits that are just going to make you feel like shit about yourself, right? So if you can see someone else's 10 steps and you can go, look, 3 of those steps are really appealing, I'm going to give that a go. And then maybe have a look at someone else's version and having a look, like I call myself the Frankenstein whisperer, so the Frankenstein business whisperer, because my business and how I believe most people's businesses run best is on their own Frankenstein version. Yeah. If you try and replicate someone else's, it's never going to be as efficient and as effective as it is if you
can take some of the best bits of what you see will work and try. And I'm also about experimenting and trying things and going, well, that didn't work, and trying something else. It doesn't have to be a perfect fit. You don't have to pick the best bits and just stick with them if they're not working. But like, I've worked with so many businesses and seen the back ends of so many businesses, even not even talking about personality type sort of stuff, but everyone uses a different mishmash of tools and apps and structure and coaches and mentors and people and all that sort of thing. And they're all different. There's no way that you could apply a cookie cutter. And you can see, you see when people, especially in business, who you can tell who they're working with quite often, because they do all look very repetitive and it's following a script, and that feels really boring as well. So, I think there's, as far as people's blueprints go, they can be a good skeleton for you to go, okay, there's some of these key elements that seem to be in all of them. So there's, some of these things. So I probably need to pay attention to that, but you still don't have to follow those exact steps.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with all of that. And I think the difficulty is, though, for a lot of people, and this is the stuff that that fills me up and I love, is all of the, is that most people really aren't very self-aware and they don't really know themselves. So this is where the trick happens. This is where they stumble and fall, I think, because it's all really good and well to go, all right, so this is the blueprint, this is the formula, this is the 7 steps, and let's take and pick and choose of which ones work well with my life or with me. But if you really don't, for most people, do the core foundational work, then how do you even know what is you?
Such a good question.
And I think that that's where the idea that, I suppose, really upsets me when I watch so many people who really are, everybody is brilliant and their ideas are brilliant, and they seem to stumble and fall a lot of the time because they follow people who might have been particularly successful without doing the core foundational work, and then they become overwhelmed, and then they feel like a failure, and then they're back not even where they came from, but at a worse position. So I'm really interested in talking with you about the importance of core personal foundations and how important they are for sustainable success, and how important they are for the core business foundations.
So I think, like you said, the self-awareness is a really big thing, and I could wax lyrical for days about a couple of different personality typing things, because I'm also a little bit addicted to those. It's one of those like in a box kind of things that us Virgos absolutely adore. But even if you're not, using things like MBTI or your love languages or DISC or any of those sorts of things, I think there's some other interesting things, whether you do journaling or have a conversation with your bestie over a glass of wine or whatever, where you can actually start to see some patterns. One of the things I did when I first started my business, and which was this business, which was about the 6th or 7th one I'd started and the only one I've stuck to for more than a couple of minutes, was I went back and I asked a heap of my friends from high school, maybe 6 or 7 friends from high school, what was I good at? What did you think I'd be when I grew up? What were some words that you'd use to describe me? Those sorts of things. And in the meantime, keep in mind, I'd been a baby massage therapist, a remedial massage therapist. I'd worked in retail for a long time. I'd done door-to-door sales for 6 months. I'd been a pizza delivery girl. Like, I've done all these things. I wanted to be an actress. I'd done and I'd studied psychology, all these sort of things. And you know what? They all came back and said things like management, organization, getting your shit together, keeping everyone on the track, accountability, all that sort of thing. I'm like, oh, you've just described my exact personality. And that was where it gave me some clues as to what I should probably start doing with my like for an income, right? So this whole thing about sticking to your own, using your strengths and your gifts, your naturally inherent things, not things that you learned at university or not things that you think you're supposed to be doing, but actually tapping into what you like doing. Like what are the things that actually light you up that you're naturally good at doing? And I just had this conversation with a client right before we got on this call, actually, that when I first started this business, and there was one sort of special offer I was doing 3 or 4 years ago, And I called my coach and I'm like, I can't keep doing this. People are paying me $100 and all I'm doing is creating an Excel spreadsheet for them. It's just Excel. They can go create their own spreadsheet. Why? I can't keep taking their money. And like, it's too easy. And she was like, that's the idea. It's supposed to feel easy to you. They're paying you because it's not easy for them, right? So there was this and I'm like, oh, that's what everyone's talking about when, like, if you work within your gifts, you're never going to work a day in your life. And I'm just like loving myself sick making spreadsheets all day for people who are paying me, just going like, this is so fun for me. I know, because I'm a total nerd, but it was fun for me, right?
Yeah.
So there was that part, was just kind of identifying and giving myself permission to make money from the things that felt easy was a really big game changer. Or, you know, and that kind of has, you know, the knock-on effects, like spending time with people who make it fun, or spending my time doing things that I enjoy doing for no reason other than that I enjoy doing them, that you don't have to be a martyr, you know, to make money or to, you know, do life and that sort of thing. So I think that's the first thing, is to get really clear on who you are and what you like doing, and then trying to fit everything else around that, rather than like, oh, I really like painting, but I don't have time because I've got all these boring things that I have to do, and doing the boring things and never having time for painting. Like, I really like painting. I'm going to make a business out of painting, or I'm going to put painting in my calendar first and everything else has to work around that. You know, those sort of things. Like, that to me is a structure and a strategy and a planning thing, but it's doing it the right way round. Do you know what I mean? It's like retrofitting everything else around the good stuff. And I think the second part of that is the idea of magnetism, where when you are in that place and you are, you know, you have the self-awareness and, you know, all the other confidence and self-esteem shit that goes along with that, which is, you know, as you know, like an ongoing process. It's not just a flick switch and hooray, I've got self-esteem. You know, it's definitely an ongoing process. But the more that you're in that and you can stand in that place of going, this is what I'm good at, this is what I need, this is how I thrive, this is what works best for me, it's really scary because it pushes a lot of people away and it pushes a lot of things away, and it might push some opportunities away, but they're not the ones that were meant for you anyway. And I'm such a big believer of that. One door shuts, 5 other ones open. And as soon as you've got the confidence and the guts to go, no, that's not the thing anymore, and you can actually close the door on something, all the right stuff starts to come in. Do you know what I mean? So it's kind of the two parts. And I always say, you like, trust the process, but you can't trust the process until you've been through the process. So you kind of have to throw some spaghetti at the wall and give it a bash until you actually trust the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. I love all of that. And I was sort of, you know, a few words come to mind that I'm jotting down as you're speaking. And when you describe that first part about asking your school friends, I think that that's something people forget with self-awareness and self-knowledge, is that people kind of think that you've got to do all of your own reflective practice or reflection, or you know, do all of those personality tests, or do it all kind of on your own or with a coach about you. But one of the pieces of self-knowledge is feedback. And that's how, like, feedback is such an important component of getting to know ourselves. Like feedback based on questions, like deliberate questions like you that you've asked people, but also feedback in how people are responding to you. Feedback about how people are responding to things that you're putting out, and actually taking those things on board to gain that bit of extra data and information to then add to your planning process. And I think this is where, even when I say that out loud, I think that's where kind of there's a differentiation between the plan and the planning process. Because I think the plan, which maybe is the part which is maybe a little, I wouldn't say useless, but has a bit of uselessness to it, because that's the part that is continuously changing, because you can have a plan and you go and do something and there's all these other obstacles or other things in the way. And then it's the planning process, which is something that's kind of ongoing, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
You know, every time something comes up or you get feedback or things happen, you move with it and you, I suppose, alter the plan, which is part of the planning process.
Exactly. Yeah, I love it. That's a really nice way to differentiate it, I think. Like, it's also similar to, you know, you talk about goals, which often people like, these are my goals. Like, no, that's your to-do list. That's the actions you need to take to get to some goals. But we kind of get lost in the terminology sometimes between plan and planning and goals and to-do lists and actions and tasks and strategy and all that sort of mumbo jumbo, right? But I guess it's it's partly, as you said, there's self-awareness and being able to adapt with that. And we talk about values quite often, and everyone's done the values workshop in high school where you identified your top 5 out of a list of 700, and then you sort of think like you're 20 years later, you're like, those aren't, maybe they might still be as applicable, but also they might not. And you can give yourself permission to go, actually, family's not my number one priority anymore. It's more about trust, or it's more about adventure, or it's more about whatever. It's okay to change those as long as it actually feels good. And when you filter your actions and your lifestyle and your goals, or whatever all the words are that you want to use it through those values on a really conscious level, it's really confronting, right? Because you sometimes, I know, did this a couple of years ago, and I'm like, no, I'm not doing values. I know what my values are. They're about trust and honesty and blah, 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 whatever they were at the time. And then when I actually did some work around the values and that sort of thing, it was like, it's the things that you can't unsee, because as soon as you're really clear on what's actually important to you and how you actually want your life to look, and the whole rhetoric about on your deathbed, what do you want to be looking back on your life thinking, and that sort of thing. It's like, as soon as you can name some of those things, you can see where the gaps are, and you can't unsee it. And it usually precipitates change, big change, little change, whatever, because you're like, shit, I can't keep doing the same thing because it's so unaligned with how I want to be doing my life. Or it's so, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, I'd be really pissed off that I still hadn't done blah, blah, blah. Absolutely. You can't unsee that, and it's really scary.
Absolutely, because I suppose that's congruency, isn't it? And congruency is the only thing which really keeps your, say, business or your goals or whatever things sustainable, like your why's sustainable. Because if you're non-congruent, meaning your values aren't aligned with what the actions that you're taking, then it's a misalignment, and then you're incongruent in what you put forward, and it's gonna have an effect on you. And, whether it becomes out in stress, or comes out of anxiety, or comes out in some sort of thing that doesn't necessarily feel very joyful anymore.
Yeah, that's it. And that's when you start seeing the sabotage of like not rocking up when you're supposed to rock up, or not replying to emails, or not whatever, like not doing some of those fundamental things because it just doesn't feel good. Like, of course you don't want to do it, and it's often there's obviously other things going on and that sort of thing. But when it happens over and over again, you've got to start questioning, like, why am I avoiding this? Or why does this all of a sudden feel too hard? And it's scary asking that question, because like I said, once you've seen it, you can't unsee it, and you can't move on until you've made some changes. And sometimes those changes are very freaking substantial. But as soon as they're done, it's like you've released whatever that thing is, like the weight is off and that sort of thing, even if you're back at square one or before. But I guess the resilience and having the support mechanisms and that sort of thing around you, that's when that sort of comes into play. And also having the self-awareness to go, oh, I'm in a hole and I need some help, and having the guts to reach out and ask for that and accept help and that sort of thing. That's a bit of a...
Absolutely. Look, I couldn't agree more. A lot of the work that I do is very much around helping people really get super, super clear on their values, and not just with work, but it might be to do with relationships or their health, or all different aspects of their life. But getting clear on your values, like you said, it's not like this high school little pick these few little things. It's actually a whole big process. And it's a process because I think in order for those values to be actioned, because there's no point in having values that just sit on a list and really don't really hold much weight, because they're unactionable. So when you think, I suppose, when we go back to thinking of what we just described in the planning process, that's the action-orientated stuff. And so I think that values have to be maybe listed in the beginning and getting clear on, but they don't hold the same worth unless we transfer them into verbs. So unless we transfer them into, great, I value honesty, but what does that actually mean as an action?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that that's really important. And that's, that's where we get the changes happening, because, that is values, and understanding our values is a massive part of our core foundations in order to have that sustainable success and to be able to plan and take action that is aligned and congruent, because we have to be able to really sort of workshop down that noun, that because most people put their values in nouns,
right, and actually look at what it actually looks like. And it probably is even it's sort of the hard thing to see the forest for the trees sometimes, isn't it, where you're like one of the things for me was let's say honesty or openness or whatever. And I always say, I'm literally the worst liar in the world. I used to be really good when I was a teenager, but now I don't know if it's because I'm lazy or just because I don't see the point in it anymore, but I'm just really bad at lying. But then when I looked at it back sort of 4 or 5 years ago, if I looked at how I was showing up in my business, for example, my best friend would still say, oh, she must be on the phone too. She's on the phone. This is your work voice, because I was still putting on the professional voice like I would have when I was in corporate, and I could be nattering away to whoever's on the desk next to me. And as soon as I pick up the voice, it's all very polished and blah, 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 blah. And I, even in my business, I had my work hours and I had to be dressed on time and I had to take my lunch break and I had to turn off at it, all those sort of rules that I had put in place, which actually wasn't being honest with the people who are watching, because that's not what I'm like. And that's why I say, even on my podcast, everything's listed as explicit, because I swear in real life, so I'm going to swear in my business. It's that sort of visibility and integrity, I suppose, but it's how you show up and giving yourself permission to actually live that value. And another one of my values is about equality and equity. And so how was that not showing up in my personal life? And the sort of things that sort of precipitated, and that was some big things, but that was what was necessary to happen in order to get to a point of going, we're back there now.
Absolutely. So your value of being honest, when it's just sat on a piece of paper that says honesty, it really didn't mean much. But when it actually, when you spelt it out and it says to show up in my business the same way I show up in my personal life, to speak in the same tones as I do in my personal life, to, that's actually transferring that value into an action. And therefore you can then align and fulfill that value and feel good about it, because you know what it looks like and it has substance to it, and it actually allows you to do
practice what you preach. Exactly.
So that it's true. I really believe that there's no such thing. There's so many people talk about work-life balance or work and life, but actually work is a part of life, especially I mean, I know for a lot of people that maybe if they're at a job and they're an employee, they're under a culture that is set in a specific way. So sometimes it can be a little bit more challenging. But I think most people that are listening today will be people that are either got their own businesses or don't have a business. And and so I think that I would say that you can't really separate personal and professional, and the patterns that show up in one are going to show up in the other. And your personal life is a vehicle to get to know yourself better, to help with your business life, and your business is a veal to get to know yourself better, to help with your personal life.
Absolutely.
So I think that both of them are just vehicles to get to know yourself better.
Put the isn't business one of the biggest personal development things you can do, because you do learn so much about yourself. And
absolutely. So now we know that, and we've got to that point that personal core foundations is really important, and it's part of the planning process for the business success. Why do you think that people maybe avoid systems? I think that there are reasons why, for me, sometimes I used to be so good at systems and organisation, and maybe in more recent times, there's times that I've avoided that. And aside from, which we'll talk about soon, intuitive flow and all of those things, what do you think some of the other reasons are that people avoid systems? Like what?
I think probably the biggest one is for a lot of people that it's boring. It is boring to create systems unless you're a Claire and a Virgo who thrives on that sort of thing. It's boring and it takes a bit more time. And, especially when we talk about things like workflows or getting a VA or putting some things in place so that you can have a support person help you in your business, for example. And this kind of goes back to even cleaning for the cleaner, right? If you're not in a business, that sort of thing. It's boring. Like it's boring setting that stuff up, and it does take more time the first time. So if I talk about like a workflow, the first time that you have to document the process that you're taking as well as do the process that you're doing, of course it's going to take longer, and that is boring, and that takes more time, and it's laborious, and you've got to pick a tool and a place to put all this stuff and add the bells and whistles, and it's dull. It's not as fun as painting. It's not as fun as delivering work with your clients. It's not as fun as the thing that is your gift that you like actually spending your time with. The trick, I guess, to that one, and the one that I really, really show people rather than tell, hopefully, is like it'll only take you more time the first time. And then every other time it'll be quicker than it was before, because either you can give it to someone else and they can follow your system, or all you're doing is ticking and flicking, and you're not having to waste your brain power and your time and energy and usually money working out like, what did I do last time? What do I have to do? And then doing it, and then kind of like trying to fill in the gaps and going back. All you're doing is doing it. You just got to do the thing, right? So in that sense, when you kind of get over that first thing of going, yeah, it's going to take you longer the first time, but every other time it's going to save you so much time and energy, that's when that sort of stuff comes into it. But I think the biggest block is that it is a bit boring. And the second one is, like you said, the not even probably the intuitive flow, but the creativity. So a lot of us feel, and me included, like, well, I've got to do that, but I just want to go and see what happens and throw some spaghetti at the wall and experiment and have fun and play and whatever, that sort of thing. And I totally get that. And like I said, it comes back to that whole, well, is that working for you? And 90% of the people, and I'm like, well, is that working for you? And they're like, no, I'm not making any money, or I haven't got any closer to my goal for the last 12 months, or this, that, and the other. I'm like, well, we just need to swing it back. We don't need to go from here all the way over to super structured and super organized and have all your bells and whistles hung on your workflow. We just need to swing it back a little bit, like just put a little bit of structure. I often talk about the freedom in structure and how having those sort of safety nets actually allows most people to feel more playful or to feel more creative because they've got the safety nets. So I often talk about, like, I obviously super planful. I quite like knowing what's coming next and surprises. I'm much better with these days, having kids for the last 7 years. I'm much more flexible with surprises. But back in the day, like when I was maybe in my early 20s, mid 20s, I was quite more, like, a lot more rigid in my personal and my work life. But when I traveled, I would literally be like, right, I'm sick of this city. I'll go to the train station, see where the next one's going. Do you know what I mean? And I was would rock up to a new town and go and check out some accommodation, but I didn't know where I was sleeping that night. And it was really clear to me, even, like, why am I so okay with such spontaneity and lack of structure when I travel? Like, why is that? Why would I not do this sort of thing at home? And when I think about it, it's because I had so many safety nets. I had my travel visa card. I had my work visa. I had my passport. I had my Lonely Planet in my backpack so I could find somewhere if I needed to. I had my emergency credit card. I had, all of these mechanisms in place. So I knew that even if I fell, I wasn't going to fall that far. Do you know what I mean? And so that felt really safe for me. So I think in the same way, in business or in life, having whatever safety net feels safe is the important thing, whether that's up really high, like just below where you're about to fall, or whether you can't even see it because it's so far below the clouds. Knowing that there's some sort of structure that's going to catch you when you fall, and nothing's going to completely be ruined when that happens, actually allows you to play more up here and try new things and that sort of thing. So
yeah. And
we're going to bit off topic there, but hopefully that answers your question.
Maybe I was thinking, when you were talking about the travel thing, I was thinking that maybe the reason that it felt so easeful and exciting was because that's what your plan was.
Yeah, probably that as well.
You know what I mean? So your plan is in a way like your
planning to be spontaneous. Yeah.
So in a way, it was the plan was to not have a plan, have such a plan, you know?
So true. That's exactly it too, I reckon. Yeah. Yeah.
So it felt really good because you were on target to what you aimed for.
Tick.
Like the why was being achieved. Because in
Yes.
the end, isn't the plan just the bigger why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So true.
So I'm thinking that one of the reasons why maybe this is just my personal shit, but a lot of people avoid systems is because then maybe we don't have an excuse for not doing something.
Yeah.
So if we avoid having a plan and having the system in place and having all those things, then if it doesn't happen, or we don't get shit done, or we don't whatever, we've actually got an excuse for it. But if you've got it all in place, then you kind of don't have an excuse for that. And I can imagine you being a recovering perfectionist, when you've got a plan, there's two sides to that with a perfectionist, because a plan works well for a perfectionist, but it also doesn't, because
not can be a complete enemy. Yeah,
that's right. Because if you have a plan and you're a perfectionist and things don't go to plan, and we all know that things don't go to plan because that's really life, then that's playing to the deeper core issues of a perfectionist.
Yeah,
that fear of failure.
Absolutely.
And when we fear failure and then we fail, then all of those deeper core issues of not feeling good enough and all of our own shit really comes up, and our issues around, there's just so many bigger issues at play that come up for us around the concept of having systems or having a plan.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think there's again, it sort of comes back to that balance of how rigid do you need your plan and structure to be, and that sort of thing, and always building in buffers and that sort of thing, which sounds really boring as well, but having a bit of I guess it probably comes down to the difference between a plan and a goal, right? So your goal is what the outcome is going to be, and the plan is how you're going to get there, right? Yep. But having some sort of mechanisms and the mindset stuff around being flexible about the vehicle that's going to get you there. So it's kind of that manifesting, like, this is where I want to be in a year, and everyone has a different process of how they're going to get there. Some people, like me, I like to chunk it down. Well, what does that mean that I have to have done by the end of January? What does that mean I have to have done by the end of February? Who's going to help me do it? What do I need to do? What are all the micro tasks? That sort of thing. And then there's other people who are manifestors, and they'll journal on it every day and set the intentions, and they'll do their vision stuff and that sort of thing, and thousands of other things, right? But yeah, you're definitely right that there's definitely a risk with being over planful, because then you drop one ball and the whole thing just feels like it's a failure. And then it's, that whole, the negative mindset, and it sort of takes you down in this awful spiral and that sort of thing. So I guess, knowing where you sit on that sort of thing is a good idea to have, I'm going to use the term again, the safety net. So for me, it's having like an accountability person. So someone who I can say, this is what I'm working on, this is what I need to do. And doing that even 2 or 3 weeks in a row. I've been working with my biz bestie for probably 3 months or so, and once a week we catch up. Half an hour, we have about 15 minutes each to talk about what we're doing. And it was really clear to me after the first 3 weeks that I was trying to do too much, because every one day I'd come back and be like, God, I only did one of the things. And that was just a good reality check. So from then on, I'm like, I'm just going to focus on one thing, just one thing. Like, there's all the little nitty gritty bits and pieces, but every week, just one thing. So the reality check, and then tweaking my expectations of what I could achieve accordingly was a really important part, and having some of those other flexibility things kind of set in. So you might go, like, I do my planning, for example, over a year. You might have seen some of my posts recently because it's October, so that's when I plan for my next year, and I get all into the school holidays and when I'm going to take all that sort of thing. And so I'd sort of do that on a large scale for a year, and then every 3 months I do the next quarter. So there's still a lot of time, and I guarantee where we're at now, October, November, December, looks like in reality compared to what I planned it to look like last October is very different. And I'm so okay with that, because it was just a bit of an overall thing, but there were some really specific goals around things like income and how much time I wanted to spend doing certain things that have been a common theme that I have kind of kept going through. So one of the things I think someone taught me years ago, and it's still an ongoing process to learn and to relearn for myself, is to think about goals and actions and all that sort of things from how I want to feel, not necessarily what the actual specific thing is, because like I said, for perfectionists, that's definitely like, well, it wasn't specifically, I didn't quite do that exact thing. So it's trying to base it more around the values and the feelings and that sort of thing. Like, I want to feel abundant, and well, what does that mean? So then I would break that down and to go like, I want to have a cleaner, and I want to have want to not work weekends, and I want to take 7 mini breaks throughout the year, that sort of thing. So, but that all leads to me. So I've got the mini actions, and if I don't then go and plan the mini breaks and block out my weekends and that sort of thing, those aren't going to happen. But the net effect of that is going, oh shit, there's my alarm to not forget my kids. Sorry about that. And so then I have the overall net effect of having done those actions is that I do feel abundant, because I've looked back and go, over the last 12 months, I've done all of these things, and that makes me feel X, Y, Z. So it's kind of filtering the actions and the micro plan stuff, not through specific like detailed sort of things, which gives you the room to go, actually, and I could have a cleaner and be like, I actually don't need a cleaner. This is just annoying me having someone in my house every 2 weeks. So I'm going to cancel that. And another thing that would make me feel really abundant is if I had fresh flowers in my house every week, whatever it is, like that sort of thing. So you can still kind of tweak it, but have that sense of achievement and have actually been moving towards an outcome throughout the whole time.
Yeah. And I suppose that comes back to what we were speaking about before, is the planning process, isn't it? And the process is just this continually ongoing thing.
Evolving.
We stop and we look at what's working and what's not working, and and we tweak accordingly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So much. And, you know, I suppose a lot of that comes down to, and I suppose looking back at the idea which we said before about how running a business is really an incredible personal development course, isn't it? Because through this process you learn about commitment and discipline and feedback and how you deal with failure and all of these things, and how they're playing out, and how we adjust accordingly and make other plans in the process. And it really is a key and an eye into your life, because if that's playing out in your work and those things come up, I bet you if you looked at those same characteristics, they're playing out in other areas of your life.
For sure. Yeah.
You know, what's playing out in your work and your lack of ability to, you know, be really disciplined or structured or committed or devoted or all those things, then you're probably playing out in other relationships as well,
for sure.
You know, or the way that you achieve anything really.
And I think the boundaries part of that is where it comes into what we sort of mentioned earlier as well, with when you often don't know where you stand on something or how you really feel about something until someone tests it or a situation tests it for you and you have that response. I remember when I was working with a lawyer to get my terms and conditions done, and I got stuck for 6 months. I sat on this document and I didn't finish the rest of the document because I got to the refunds bit, like, what's your refund policy? And I'm like, gosh, I don't know. And I went and looked at a few other people's refund policies and none of them seemed to kind of feel right. And then finally someone asked me for a refund, and the whole situation that led up to that was like, I was so clear in what I wanted to be able to say. And I didn't, because I didn't have that structure in place and that sort of thing. So but it made it very, very clear to me what that structure needed to be or what my boundary was around that. And that's kind of that trust the process. Like, I had to wait until that process happened until I could be really clear on what it needed to be. So, and that sort of opportunity seems to be amplified when you have a business, right? Because these sort of things just come out of left field, and there are people who've been playing in this space for a lot longer, and they do know a bit more about, the ins and outs and that sort of thing. And it's not until you kind of come up face to face with it that you know where you stand on it. Yes. Or how you're going to deal with it. And absolutely, when you get clear on any of those boundaries in your business, as with personal life, but certainly when it's tested in your business, it does shine a light on where you're not holding other boundaries in your personal life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And like, God, this person just totally walked all over me because I didn't know what my boundaries and I wasn't clear. And then you kind of get your back up and you're like, and that friend over there, she's also blah, blah. And it just it does really shine a light on everything.
And that's why the best personal development course is actually life. Living and having action, as opposed to a whole lot of trainings after trainings after trainings.
Totally. Stop doing courses.
Yeah. And just live life through working, and and then the growth comes in that self-awareness piece, and really coming back to like taking note and being able to witness yourself in other situations, and then being really honest with yourself and being able to call yourself out on your bullshit.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And talking about some people calling themselves out on their own bullshit, do you think that maybe showing up or looking busy or looking productive or looking like you have a big planning process especially on social media is also tied up in people's worth and feeling valuable?
I think it is, and I think that's a bit of a shame, especially with the productivity and that sort of thing. Like, your productivity does not equal your worth.
Yeah.
And when I first heard that quote a couple of years ago, I really struggled with it, because I was like, yes, it does. And if not, then what does? And what is it? Then, like, if it's not what I can show at the end of the day, it's like I always used to say, I really love cleaning. I really love vacuuming, because I can spend 5 minutes and the place instantly looks better. Like, it's a really fast. I've started 3 degrees, never finished one, but I've got 5 diplomas. So I'm good with short term. Like, I just want to get in, do the thing, get the outcome, be able to see, like, look what I got. Look, I did this thing and then I got this thing, right? Very process driven, and very like, I need a tangible thing, and I need to be able to like, look, this is the thing, this is what I've done. And I was always very triggered when I first started my business, and my then husband would say, so what did you do today? And I'd be like, well, you'd never ask me that if I was at the office. Like, when I had a corporate job, you'd never ask me. But I was always really triggered by that, because I wasn't making a great deal of money in the beginning. And I was like, what have I done? Like, I've been busy for 8 hours, but what have I actually got to show for it? And there was a lot of confidence and self-esteem issues in that. And like, every other day I'm like, right, I'm just going to go and get a job. I'll go and, I need to go and check out Seek and that sort of thing. So yes, I totally get it. But I think over the course of years and having these conversations and having these light bulbs and going through the process and going, actually, what lights me up and what makes me feel better, and seeing that when I do more of those things, I automatically get more of the rewards that I'm seeking anyway. That's where you kind of start to understand that it doesn't have anything to do with your worth, right? So it's definitely a perfectionist trait that I have to have something to show for what I've just been doing, and I need everyone around me to see that, and if they don't see it, then maybe I'm not worth it. Maybe I should go and get a job, and all of those sorts of things. But yeah, it's a tricky one. Not a mindset coach, but hopefully that's helped a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is it is quite true, and I think it's a really common thing. And with social media, especially in both of us being in the women's business circles, you do see, when you see someone who's posting regularly and in a lot of seem to have a lot of order in their posting. If you don't really know behind the scenes and you don't know them personally, it's very easy to make an assumption that they've got their shit together. And they're really valuable, and their business is really good. And I would suspect that the more they're putting their stuff out there, that's their avenue to feeling a bit worthy when maybe they're not necessarily producing stuff that they really want to produce. But in order to lessen that feeling within and deal with it properly, if they just keep putting out more stuff, sometimes that is a almost a band-aid for some of the deeper stuff that maybe they need to be addressing.
Possibly. And I guess, that's definitely a thing that I suspect goes on, and the whole, don't compare your real life with someone else's highlight reel and that sort of thing. But I think moreover, like whatever other people are doing and putting out on social media, and whether that's a band-aid or not, the most important thing is to almost remain in your own silo a little bit. Like, okay, I see what they're doing and I can make assumptions about whether they're doing really great or whether they're actually not doing anything that they say they're going to do and their whole life's a shit show. That's none of my business. That has absolutely no impact on me. It's more about going, what feels good to me, what's consistent and sustainable and doable and actually lights me up. And if that's not showing up on social media 3 times a day, then don't freaking do it. Doesn't matter who else is doing it. Doesn't matter what their reason is for doing it. It's completely irrelevant to your life, right? The important thing is to go, this is what I want to do and this is what feels good to me. And if I can say I'm going to show up and do one post that's about my cat on a Friday afternoon once a week on social media, go nuts. Get consistent at that and then move on. Like, we don't want to go from 0 to hero and go, okay, I'm in startup, so I have to be in the same position that someone who's been doing this for 10 years is. It's like no one goes to, their first, Bollywood dance class and expects to be on Bollywood film by the next week. It's a process, and everyone's process is so much different time-wise and steps-wise and all of those sort of things. Like, it doesn't matter what anyone else is doing, and I don't even think you need to worry about the intention or the real life, what's going on. It doesn't matter, really. It has absolutely no thing. If you're being authentic and you're in that space of, this is me, this is what I do, this is how I do it, unapologetically, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, absolutely. And remembering as well that a lot of people like yourself probably has fantastic automation processes, and so they're not spending the whole time literally what it looks like putting posts out continuously. They've actually automated them for quite maybe even a few weeks in advance.
6 months.
So
totally.
So also for those that might be starting out, that's a good thing to remember, that what looks like something isn't always exactly what you might imagine. And again, to your point, Claire, that just stay in your own lane and do what feels good and right for you at any particular moment in time. Which then comes down to the flip side, which is intuitive flow, doing what feels good in the moment at any particular time.
Yep.
So, the thing about intuitive flow is that there's some real benefits about it, because it sort of goes with the flow of life and its unpredictability of what we've talked about in, so far. But one of the things that is difficult with going with your intuitive flow is that when you have an intuitive idea, it's often a new idea. So something that you haven't done before, because that's what is coming up. And so many of us have, I think, or so many people have intuitive ideas that never go anywhere.
Right.
Because starting something new that just comes up can be really uncomfortable. You can make mistakes. You got to be imperfect. And so we tend to just ignore all of those things and not take action, as hard as it is, and out of the fear of failure. So do you think that maybe people use structure and planning as a crutch to feeling in control because they haven't really learned how to self-trust?
I think so. It's definitely a risk, and it's I had a conversation with someone recently who's an intuitive money coach, and she kind of gave me the same message, like, you're being pretty safe here, like you got everything sorted out and you're just coasting and doing the same thing, rinse and repeat. And I'm like, and it actually feels really good at the moment, but I also know that there's something bigger and it's quite different. And I'm kind of like, sometimes I'm like, okay, tell me what's the thing, let me download. And then sometimes I'm like, nope, I'm fine here, don't talk to me about anything else, I'm not having any more ideas, there's no new things going on, that sort of thing. So it depends on my willingness as well, right? But absolutely, having like being in the comfort zone, is a wonderful place to be, because it's easy, right? And I am all about ease and that sort of thing to a certain extent, and being okay with choosing the easy way and whatnot.
Yeah.
But there's definitely a point that gets to, like, and you feel it, you're like, oh, this feels dull and boring and repetitive, and I've got to kind of get out of the comfort zone and try something new. And I think there's probably the thing that I really like about having a bit of structure is that I've got those things that are on autopilot that just keep happening and keep rolling in, which means I've got that safety net of income and stability and that sort of thing. Yeah. So again, I've got time to play with the other stuff. You know, and that feels really abundant. And when the ideas come in, I'll talk about this often with things like workflows for, I'd say something basic like publishing a blog. And the people who are like, I don't want to plan my blogs because I want, you know, when I get the creative download, I just want to go with the flow. And I think that's awesome. And if that's how your process happens, whether you're creating a course or creating a new thing or you're redecorating your house, whatever, you do need to be able to have the flexibility to go with the flow and to tap into that beautiful creative energy that only seems to strike every now and then. But it's much easier to actually bring those things to life and to go from conception to completion if there's a structure to follow, and if there's other things that make it easier for you to just not go, oh my gosh, this is going to be amazing, but it's too hard to get there, so I won't do it at all. That's just such a shame. It's my number one reason. You look at my very early website, and that was the biggest thing, because I kept coming across people who said, I've got these ideas and I've got this amazing thing and I'm going to change the world. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And I could see all you need to do is step 1, then step 2, step 3. Like, I'll break it down for you in a heartbeat. That's my zone of genius, right? Here you go. Here's your strategy. Off you go. Enjoy, sort of thing. And then a year later, 2 years later, I'd have a chat with them again. And how did that thing go? Oh no, I could never do that. Oh no, I need to go and study first, or I need to save up $50,000, or I need to blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what? This thing was going to change your life, and all you needed to do was step 1 through 3 and you'd be there, sort of thing. And it just made me so upset that there are these incredible, life-changing, game-changing, world-changing women, especially, with these amazing ideas, but there's no way for them. They can't see how to get there, or there's a mindset, or there's some other sort of block. And I just think it's the biggest freaking shame ever. And I just want that to not be a thing. Part of what I can bring to that is to go, okay, here's your big dream. These are the things we need to do now to make it, you know, start the ball rolling or whatever. Yeah. And that's essentially why I started my business, because I was just sick of seeing that time after time after time, especially with my female friends and family. Yeah. Like, do this thing. I want to buy this thing from you. You need this for your life and your family.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right. And it really pains me as well, you know, when I see so much potential and opportunity in people. Yeah. And I just want to like, come on. You know, I just act in the minute.
I'll hold myself back.
Make it happen. So I suppose there is, when we talk about going with the flow, sometimes it will alleviate the stress. And sometimes it'll create more stress, and sometimes it'll alleviate overwhelm, and sometimes it'll create more overwhelm. And I suppose in summary to that, it's like, just really keep coming back to yourself to really know what is being aware of, like, you know, when am I feeling stress in my body, and when am I feeling overwhelmed, and when am I not?
Yeah. And giving yourself permission to stop doing stuff that's not working and try something else. And, you know, the amount of times you see people, especially in the first few years of business, they're like, this is my thing. And then they go, that's not working. I'm going to try this now. And then they try that. And then they go, no, I'm actually going to go back to this. And they sort of do this swing and go back. And that's perfect. That's exactly what needs to happen in order to go, oh, I think I might try this. Oh shit, that didn't work. Let's try this over here. Oh yeah, that was all right, but I didn't love it. I'm going to try this now. Like, that's the beauty of starting your own business, but it's also in all of your life stuff. And once you've seen that a few times in process, wherever, I'm using business as an example, but once you've seen that, like, I did a presentation at Seven Sisters where I saw you a few years ago, and I kept saying, like, but did you die? Like, it's stuffed up. You ruined it. It totally was a complete dog's breakfast, but did you die? Don't worry about it. Move on and try the next thing. Like, it's fine. Nothing is like that dreadful, even when you've stuffed it up, that it's a big deal, sort of thing. So having the playfulness and the curiosity and the courage, I suppose, to just give something a bit of a go and go, oh, well, that was shit. That didn't work. Write it off. Go and keep moving. Like, it doesn't matter. It's all an experiment, right?
That's right. And not to be defined by it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not like a definition of your failure in one actual thing isn't, or a project doesn't define who you are. You are,
No.
something is a failure, you're not a failure.
Failing is not a failure. Failing is fucking awesome, really, because it shows you
learning
what not to do next time, right?
Absolutely. Coming from the recovering perfectionist.
Yes.
Beautiful.
It's been a process, but yes.
Yes. So what would be some of your, like we've really come to the fact that in order to use planning in a successful way, we have to really have good agility muscles. So the ability to pivot and move and dodge and the obstacles in the planning process. So what would be your main tips for anybody in working their agility muscles?
Awesome. I think one of the big things which we kind of touched on is I like to call it the bullshit clause. So whether that's yourself or having someone else who knows you and your tendencies and your procrastination-y things and the self-sabotage stuff that we do, or it's yourself if you're depending on like where you're at with the accountability thing, is having the bullshit clause and having some sort of mechanism in place where someone, whether it's you or someone else, can say, all right, cut the shit, you are totally off track, or you're throwing yourself under the bus here. Like those sort of things in place is the biggest thing for me, and just having someone who knows what I'm about to do and can say, Claire, and like sometimes it's my best friend, sometimes it's my biz bestie, and they just have to raise an eyebrow and I'm like, yes, I know. I've got friends that have permission to water spray me, so if they see me going off track when I'm like, this is my goal, I'm not wavering, and I'm not like, this is really important to me, and it's really important to me because XYZ. As soon as they see me straying somewhere, I often get the water spray, a gif or something from a friend like, stop. I'm like, yes, okay, fine. Because I'm just procrastinating, or I'm just doing something because for whatever reason. And sometimes I'm like, no. I know I said that, but this is really important as well because, well, and sometimes I give myself permission to override the bullshit clause. That's fine. But often it's just being called a my own bullshit. So I think that's a really important part for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And
so
probably
tip is the bullshit detector. Have the
bullshit detector.
Yeah.
And probably the other thing is finding a way to give yourself permission to play an experiment, and whatever that looks like, whether it's working with a coach or a mentor or reading the books or putting in some things into your plan, like doing things that you're going to fail at, or doing things you're going to be awful at the first time or something like that, and just giving yourself permission to fuck it up. That's a really big game changer when, again, you're like, oh, everyone hated it and I hated it, but no one died. Okay, cool. Next time I make a tiny wee mistake, it really doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So having
into things, and also humor, being able to laugh at yourself and bring
right.
In. So
exactly.
Joyful productivity and good bullshit detector.
Yep, exactly.
Fantastic. I think they're great things to end on.
Awesome. Excellent.
So in everything that we've sort of covered, which is quite a lot, like, we really, really, I think, stripped back the whole idea of planning and planning process and what that brings up, and the personal development and the professional development and the, success and the I suppose the transference of life and business, and it all being one and they're not being separate, and all of these lovely things that we talked about, which are so great and so useful. Is there anything else that you think that maybe we didn't cover that you'd want to get out?
I don't think so. I think we went in a few different directions there, so hopefully that was helpful. But no, I don't think so. I think the really big thing is that you said it exactly at the beginning, like someone else's blueprint is their blueprint. It worked for them. That's fantastic. But no matter if it's one step different or 50% of it that's different, or one step that you can take from them, you don't have to do the same thing that anyone else is going to do. And it's, same with parenting. I read a couple of parenting books and we followed them and they saved our lives, but we didn't follow them to a T either, right? It was about just going, well, that's crap and I'm definitely not doing that, but that sounds like it could work and let's give that a go, and just having permission to do things your way and Frankenstein things together. It doesn't have to be someone else's perfect thing, even if it looks like they've got everything sorted out. Maybe they do, but their situation is 99% definitely different to yours.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. You're just a wealth of
Such a good chat
to all this, and it's just, I hope anyone listening had as much fun as we've had just chatting away about this fabulous topic. So thank you so much, Claire. It's been such a pleasure, and you're such an inspiration, and I love what you do, and I think I need to probably book in a time to get my system organised a little bit more and start addressing some of this COVID procrastination.
The end is in sight, hopefully.
Yes. So anyway, I'm just wanting to know for everyone, what's your biggest takeaway or insight from today's conversation? We'd love to know. So if you could leave a comment and let us know. And if you'd like more information on Claire and some of her services or things that she's got on offer, how can they find you, Claire?
Probably the best place is just Facebook or Instagram. Claire Riley Coaching is the handle for both of those. And Instagram is more of the inspo, fun, sassy, behind the scenes stuff. And Facebook, there's a bit more blogs and podcasts and juicy tips and that sort of thing. Brilliant.
And if you're looking to get all your content all organised, you've got an incredible program called Batch It
Crazy?
Batch It Crazy. So is that on now? Is that continual? Is that something?
Yeah, it's continual. Yeah, so it's a monthly membership. We've been going for about 3.5 years now. So we've had about 75 people through, and it's $50 a month normally. We do specials on it sometimes for the yearly things, but we do monthly or weekly calls for co-working and strategy around content marketing, including email, social media, that sort of thing. So lots of fun in there. We have we have a good laugh and lots of planning and strategy.
I'm sure it's a ball.
Thank you.
So if you've enjoyed today's episode, please share it with your friends and consider subscribing to the Wellthy Living podcast on iTunes and on YouTube. To find out more about my services, you can visit my website at wellthyliving.com.au. That's wellthy.com.au. So until next time, remember, connection is medicine.